Welcome, by the way. My name is Nick Voris, and I am with the Energy Solutions Group at Evergy. The Energy Solutions Group is primarily responsible for customer programs like energy efficiency, but also our electrification programs, which include EV charging. It is my group that is responsible for the clean charge network of public charging stations that are around our service area. In fact, the manager of that network, sorry, Wendy, she's hiding from us right now. She's right over here. So if you had a question, comment about the clean charge network, please, Wendy in the red and black, she is your person. Let me also say at the onset, just a couple of housekeeping things. We have the bathrooms are just head to the end of that hall to your left. If there happens to be an emergency in the next hour, y'all follow me. We're heading out that door behind that, the gray panels. If I'm the reason for the emergency, we are following the aforementioned Wendy or Eric. So I think we're covered there. With that, let's see if I can, also, by the way, congratulations on navigating the garage. Well done. Glad you're here. May the odds be ever in your favor upon exit here in about an hour. Wanted to just take a couple minutes before we bring up our panelists and highlight a few EV-related 7 things from an Evergy perspective, beginning with our portfolio of programs that support electric vehicles in our service area. It's especially important to highlight some of these programs because they started out 5 years long, but they started out 5 years long in like 2021, 2022. So we're getting down to the end. I think we are at a point where a lot of these programs, particularly the I guess it would be your leftmost third, are down to about a year, 16 months of program life left. And I really would just focus on this leftmost third because they are most applicable to why we are here today, which is talking about EV charging. We have a rebate for folks who have EVs and are charging at home. And if it's a new EV and they don't have a charger set up yet, or let's say they have an EV and they're living on 120, if they want to upgrade to 240 and they meet our eligible requirements, then we have a rebate that will help offset some of the cost of transitioning from 120 to 240 volt charging. And you might ask, well, why on earth would you do that? And I would say the rest of the story, the rationale behind that rebate is that probably a lot of people in this room know that you can charge 8-9 times faster on 240 than 120. So once your car needs 60-90 minutes a day plugged in as opposed to 10-12 hours a day plugged in, now we can move that around over time. So that's the long game here, right, is to shift charging to off-peak hours. Secondly, I would just note the commercial charging rebate, and that rebate is available to non-utility entities who are interested in installing charging in these various use cases, and there's a rebate for either level 2, the 208, 240, slower charging, or for DC fast chargers. And of course, those machines being quite a bit more expensive, the rebate is quite a bit bigger. The only other thing I think that I would point out on our portfolio is the time of use rates. We have, if you have an EV, be it at work or at home, there's likely a time of use rate that you can jump on that does 2 things. One is it decreases your fueling cost, in most cases markedly decreases your fueling costs. And secondly, it incentivizes folks to, again, charge off peak, which is a key priority of Evergy. Junking into, it's not too early for charts. It's never too early for charts. But right-hand slide is how EV adoption is progressing in Evergy's service area. The orange is what has happened, and the gray is what we expect. And we just, I think, crossed the threshold of about 40,000 EVs in our service area towards the end of last year. It looks like this is This is applicable through the third quarter of last year. And you can see that really pronounced kind of leveling off that is the confluence of a lot of factors, not the least of which being the policy environment, particularly at a national level, changing not in a great way from an EV adoption perspective, and we've seen that in our most recent trajectory of EV adoption in our service territory. You'll also see that when we run this out through 2030, we're thinking, the better part of 150,000 EVs in our service area by the end of this decade. Well, before the policy environment kind of turned upside down, I think I had this chart range from 0 to 250,000 vehicles. So you can see that the policy environment has had a marked effect on our expectations for EV growth in this region through the end of the decade. That said, it's a shorter amount of time every day, but a lot can still happen between now and 2030. The policy environment changed on time once, you say it won't happen again. Secondly, the spaghetti chart is 5 years of school to learn that term. The spaghetti chart is our monthly clean charge network utilization. Each of those lines is a year. So if you look at the bottom, that's 2021. That's the total kilowatt hours per month that we are dispensing from the clean charge network, and you can kind of see year over year that growth. Coming out of the pandemic, we were doubling our EV population about every 2 years, and that was manifesting itself in our clean charge network growth in the utilization of our clean charge network year to year. But what you will also notice, again, kind of second verse same as the first, is if you look at the topmost trace, that's 2025, and you look out towards the second half of the year, you start to see it converge with the year before. So, in other words, a pronounced slowdown in year-over-year growth. That being said, I want to kind of start transitioning us towards the topic of the day by just highlighting that there has nonetheless been significant activity in the public charging space through the past 3 years or so. And what we've done here is we've just kind of provided some excerpts, some of the key players in particularly the DC fast charge space that are installing charging sites, again, in our service area. You've got Tesla, which, we're knocking on the door of 20 Tesla sites in the Evergy service area. Ionda's coming on strong with 3 sites in our area. There's 3 between here and the Kansas-Colorado state line. I've actually used every one of them on my last trip to Denver. It's the first time that I was in the Fleet Ford Mach-E, first time I've ever made it to Denver without using a single Tesla charging site, which feels remarkable to me. I think that's been technically possible for a long time, but not a great experience. It's a pretty great experience now. Let's see here. What else would I want to point out? Walmart. Walmart is becoming really active in this space. We don't have any chargers installed at Walmart yet, but we have 8 Walmarts in our service area where they have signaled they are going to be installing charging stations. I think the first one I can remember is 75th and Neiman-ish on the Kansas side. That's maybe some of y'all's Walmart. There's a second one that they put a name to, but I can't remember where that one is. Anyway, Walmart, very active. They're putting in the same kind of 400 kW machines that Iona uses, kind of much to my chagrin. I really would have rather them put in 80 to 50 kilowatt machines while you're shopping at Walmart, the big 400 Damer Shamers, but hey, it's Walmart. With that, let's bring up panelists and start kind of the real part of the show. So again, thank you. And how we're going to run today is we have our 3 panelists, Adam, Brian, and Tami, and they did not submit to me introductions, which means they get to do their own introductions. So blank page, explore the space with that, and then we'll cycle through all 3 of them, and they're going to educate us on kind of their respective areas. be thinking about questions because we're going to roll from that 3 kind of summaries to an open Q&A. And if y'all don't have questions, I'm sure after hearing these guys for the next 20, 25 minutes, I'm going to have some. Between us, we're going to keep them busy for the back half of this event. With that, who wants to go first? Adam, great. That's a great idea. Take it from here.
Introductions, all 3, and then go back to...
Let's do...
Like quick introductions.
Just like with practice, Adam. Let's do introduce yourselves, 1, 2, 3, and then we'll cycle back to you, and you can let her rip. How about that?
Okay. Thanks there. Hello?
It takes a few seconds to...
Hello? Wake up. Yeah, good now. All right. Hey, everybody. My name's Adam Gleason. I'm a transportation electrification engineer at HDR. So on the private side of things, but get to work with a lot of different fleets all over the country, but we'll be focusing on our work with the city of Kansas City, Missouri today.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Alferman. I'm the Sustainability Program Manager for Johnson County, Kansas. And it's kind of a dual role. I support our organization internally and operationally and all the departments that we have. But I also represent Johnson County out of the community, so have the pleasure of working with a lot of our community partners, including cities. And that's what this project that I'll talk about today really represents, a manifestation of those partnerships.
And I'm Tami. Tami Alexander. I'm with the Kansas Department of Transportation. I'm the Alternative Fuels Program Manager, kind of a mouthful. Right now, a lot of that work is on the NEVI program, which is that federal funding that was rolled out to build a charging network around the state. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in Kansas for EV charging.
Awesome. Okay, I'll give an overview of my topic. So really 2 parts. One is just giving an update on where the city of Kansas City, Missouri is in their fleet electrification journey. And then the other is a quick project spotlight on a project we worked together on to plan for additional infrastructure to keep their fleet electrification momentum going. So first thing, just want to report on where the city's at in terms of EVs in their fleet, and really want to give a shout out to the city for this. I'm just the number guy here reporting the numbers, but the fleet managers, department leaders, and city staff have really been leading this effort to date. So the city is up to 98 electric vehicles across 8 departments. The 2 biggest using departments with EVs right now are the fire and health departments, which make up about 75% of the EVs in the fleet. All those EVs in the fleet right now are light duty, so they're focusing on that light duty segment, which is a little bit easier to electrify. But to put in perspective, the city has about 850 light duty vehicles in their fleet, so a little over 10% electrified, but still a long ways to go and a lot more work to be done. And to put the entire fleet into perspective, they have about 2,000 vehicles, including medium duty and heavy duty. So when we think about fleet electrification, these big cities, counties, Johnson County too, they're big fleets. There's a lot of work to do to electrify them. They have charging at the fire department locations, the municipal service center, which is a city facility that houses multiple departments. So use charging there, as well as the health department, which I got a little bit more information on those chargers because they're new. So I wanted to share about those. But they have 5 DC fast chargers there that have been installed in the last year. And they did just have level 2 overnight charging, but we're able to install these DC fast chargers to be able to increase their usage of their 28 EVs that they have. So they're still talking to a health department representative, gave me some information. She said they're still getting used to that operational change of overnight level 2 to swapping midday DC fast charging, as well as small things like the staff getting used to the much larger cables of a DC fast charger. So it's cool to hear kind of the nitty gritty, boots on the ground, what happens, what's after we install these chargers. That's a quick overview of where they're at, and then just quickly also on the infrastructure plan for fleet electrification that we partnered with the city on. Just wanted to give a few high-level details from that to hopefully help other agencies in this process. But really, starting out, the biggest thing was just remembering that the fundamental difference in EVs is the fuel source, which is why the fueling infrastructure is so important. And EVs are only as good as the chargers we have to support them. So for a long time, I think in the industry, we had this chicken and egg situation of, do we build chargers or do we get EVs first? And I think we finally settled the debate that charging has to come first or we're not going to get more EVs. And on the fleet side, that's especially true. We want to have the infrastructure planned for and installed before we're procuring EVs into our fleet. So we came at it with that lens of, let's go ahead and get this infrastructure plan together so that as we procure more EVs over time, we're prepared for that. And we've been focusing on light-duty vehicles. Like I mentioned, that market is just more mature right now. And again, with over 800 light-duty vehicles in the fleet, a lot of work can be done just on that segment while we wait for that medium-duty, heavy-duty segment of EVs to improve technology-wise. And then at a high level, our process was, 1, determine the charging requirements, 2, then the power requirements, how are we going to plug them in, and then lastly, site the chargers to minimize operations disruptions. So on the charging requirements side, one thing that was interesting we did was looked at the fleet data to see how much these vehicles are used, how many miles they travel, and if they'd be able to share charging. So that's a big thing in our fleet work is, do we need one charger for every vehicle or can we swap them out? And to be able to do that analysis, though, you need to know how much your vehicles travel. So KCMO has pretty good telematics data, which we were very thankful for, but just understanding your fleet, how much do they travel every day at the vehicle level, really allows for that analysis to happen. And then another thing was looking at, when we're going to charge these vehicles, and Nick mentioned time of use rates, but here with the Evergy plan, if we were going to do a new service, we wanted to size the chargers so that vehicles could get a full charge overnight in that super off-peak window of midnight to 6 a.m., so that we had level 2 chargers that had high enough amperage, and we could do that to take advantage of those maximized cost savings. Which, speaking of power, so the next thing was looking at power requirements, whether we'd be doing a new service or using existing service equipment. And when you're doing EV charging, a lot of times it's a new service that you're doing more than a few chargers, just because our buildings were not set up to be able to support a bunch of EV chargers on top of their existing loads. So with that new service brings Evergy into the fold, and they were a really important partner of getting that utility on the project from the beginning. We were able to leverage their engineering expertise on their system to figure out, hey, what makes the most sense of where we could tie into the Evergy network, where we can draw power from, that sort of thing. So having them in the project from the beginning really helps put that puzzle piece together for these infrastructure plans. And then last thing was siting the chargers, just making sure that we got out into the field to go see these facilities. Our project consisted of 4 facilities, and each was unique. A couple of them were surface parking lots. One was a parking garage downtown, so very different sites. So we walked each site just to make sure, how does this work operationally right now? Where could we get power from? How would this work? Where should the chargers go? That sort of thing. So making sure we understood the site, at a in-person level before putting the plan together. So I'll just end with, I think the biggest lesson we took out of this project was just how important collaboration is in fleet electrification. We need every player at the table, from the city fleet managers to the department end users who's actually going to be using the vehicles. We can help bring the engineering expertise and then bringing the utility in as well to make sure we're all on the same page, and we're doing that from the beginning and not a bunch of work and then reaching out to them. So that's a quick overview of what we're doing with the city's fleet electrification.
Okay. Be next. Please. Well, I'll balance Adam's fleet project with a public-facing project that we're right in the middle of right now. But we started in 2023 with a grant application. It was a collaboration between Johnson County and Climate Action KC to apply for some carbon reduction program grant funds through the Federal Highway Administration. And so we collaborated on that application, and it was for public-facing EV charging infrastructure. We called it Connecting JoCo. And the main thrust around it was to address one of the key outcomes of the Regional Climate Action Plan, which came out about that time, which was to switch gasoline fuel vehicles to electric. And incidentally, Johnson County is proud to be the first county that endorsed that climate action plan. And so this was us getting into the implementation and taking some of that action. And so we were proud to take that step with Climate Action KC on this project. Well, what it is in its essence, as I said, it's a public EV charging pilot program, and working with 6 partners that I'll name in a minute. 6 partners. We've got 28 level 2 chargers going in at 11 sites that are existing nodes of activity, as we call them. So these are public places like courthouses and community centers and parks and pools and places like that, where people are already congregating, in sometimes for large amounts of time, where they're going and they're staying. And so, like I mentioned, these are level 2 chargers. Fast chargers are absolutely necessary to be rolling out in our region. We still think there's a place for level 2 chargers, especially in some of these locations where people are spending a lot of time. And so we have, we're about in between the 30% and 60% design phase of this project right now. And where they're going in, we've got 2 going in, and at all of these locations, we have at least 2 chargers going in with 2 ports each. Johnson County Courthouse, we've got the Mid-America Sports Complex, which is a Johnson County Parks and Rec District project. The City of Mission is putting chargers in at the Powell Community Center and Broadmoor Park. We have Prairie Village putting chargers in at Wassemer Park and Roland Park at the Community Center, Roland Park Community Center, and then Overland Park is putting in the lion's share at Young's Pool, Hickory Hills Park, the Myron Scaife Building, Roe Park, and additional chargers at the Overland Park Convention Center, on top of some that they are already installing right now. We're able to add some of the chargers from this project onto their existing project, which is actually utilizing federal funds as well. So we're not just randomly putting chargers out there where we think we have likely partners or willing partners. These are pretty strategic locations, and we actually had more partners on board at the very beginning. The pace of this project, I mentioned, we applied in 2023, and we still are just in the design phase in early 26, and we hope to be bolting these to the ground, hopefully starting in the fall of this year. So this has been a pretty long project. Mostly because it's new. We haven't done this before. Working with KDOT, they haven't done this before. So designing the specifications and the standards and how do we do this with multiple partners. We had the city of Lenexa was on board early to put in chargers at their new Justice Center that just got built, and it was actually under construction when we applied for these grant funds, and they knew they wanted to put chargers in, and so there was perfect opportunity for them. That project was moving way too fast for this project to be part of that. So they ultimately ditched and said, we got to do this on our own, which they ultimately did. They put in a number of chargers there. But the point being that we've been strategic about this to the extent that we could strategize for doing something new in the context of infrastructure that isn't really designed for this, which has presented enough struggles on its own. But it was also not only a response to the climate action plan, but also some of the things that we know about our community, specifically Johnson County. One is that our current transportation sector makes up about 34% of our region's greenhouse gas emissions, and so this is addressing that. We also know, and these might be some dated numbers from 23, but only about 0.5% of the registered vehicles in Johnson County are either electric vehicles or plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Well, if we know that 7% of current new car sales are electric vehicles. So to Adam's point about needing to get infrastructure in to anticipate what we know is going to be an increase in electric vehicle adoption. These are the kinds of projects we need to be thinking about. And then it's also coincidentally and very conveniently, Mid-America Regional Council did a regional EV readiness plan, which we were proud to help fund as well. But it brought out some more information and some more strategy that we needed to be contemplating for not only our region, but our county in particular. One is that access to charging is one of the biggest barriers. Not interest in electric vehicles, because we know that's there, but it's access to the charging that is a real barrier to that adoption and making progress on that adoption. And we also wanted to site these at public facilities. Obviously, this is a lot of jurisdictions, a lot of cities, counties, parks, districts collaborating on this, but we wanted to put these in actual neighborhoods. Just like there's a place for fast chargers, there's a place for charging in highway corridors, which I know Tami will touch on. There's absolutely a place for these to be sited in neighborhoods. And so we took a strong angle of environmental justice and disadvantaged census tracts in this project, and made sure to the extent that we could, balancing out all the factors, some of which I'd mentioned, that we could put these in the right place, that would be accessible to the right populations to begin to knock down some of those barriers to EV adoption that we know exist, and that regional EV readiness plan pointed out to us. It also pointed out that Johnson County has one of the highest number of priority charging locations in the region. So that was a very broad plan, and incorporated a lot of different metrics, a lot of different data, a lot of different trend points, but it did identify Johnson County as being one of the hottest targets, or the most prioritized areas for extended EV charging infrastructure. And so this is our response to that, and we played pretty well into that regional plan. And we also wanted to address one of the other barriers, which is range anxiety. Again, we know this is one of those persistent issues that anybody who has had an EV or talked to anybody who's contemplated having an EV or has rolled out EVs in their fleet and has almost forced people to adopt electric vehicles, the range anxiety is real. People get very, very wrapped up in where are they going to charge? How are they going to charge? How long does it have to sit there? Is it going to interrupt my schedule? These are real barriers that need to be addressed, and so we wanted to reduce some of that range anxiety and normalize EVs in everyday life. And part of that is putting these in public places where they're already going, again, so that you can see EV charging stations at the park that you bring your children to, at the library that you bring your family to, at the pool, at the courthouse, at the places where people are already going. It normalizes that. It normalizes EVs to the extent that it's no longer experimental. This is reality. And so removing one of those anxiety barriers was important to us. And so that's our project in short. I probably gone over my 5 minutes, but this represents us moving beyond planning and more into implementation for EV charging infrastructure. And we call this a pilot for a reason. This is our first time that we've incorporated so many partners in a project like this, and our intent was to do more and to do more faster and to do it more efficiently. So having one project manager, me, one design consultant, one bid package, all makes that faster and more efficient so that we can do the next block easier. And it demystifies it for 6 partners instead of 1. And so the next time we do this, maybe with a different project manager, it's easier. And so we're excited to get these in the ground. We're excited to start getting data. We're excited to have these adopted by the public. But we're probably most excited to be doing all of this together, our partners.
All right, so I'm going to talk about, Brian mentioned the range anxiety, and that's a lot of what we're working on with the NEVI program. the federal program, the original goal of that was to build a nationwide network of EV chargers so that you could do long-distance travel across the country without having to worry about where you're going to charge your vehicle. Under that, states were allotted funding. Kansas happened to be allotted about $39.5 million. That was split out over 5 years of funding. So far, we have awarded 15 charging stations along interstates, U.S. highways, et cetera, throughout the state. During the federal pause with funding last year, we've had probably what's going to end up 3 of those have had to back out just due to changes in financials, equipment costs, et cetera, over the time we were paused from February through September. So what's that leave us, like 12 stations that we're moving forward with. The first one we actually opened last March in Emporia, which was definitely our most asked for location in the state. We need a station in Emporia. We need a station in Emporia. I probably got an email about that weekly prior to that, which, you know, it's right between the 3 biggest cities, Topeka, Kansas City, Wichita. Actually used it on my way up from Wichita this morning, stopped there and charged. So that was great. We got that one open. That was the only one that was able to continue operating during the federal pause. We were at a point where we could keep going with it. The others, we had to pause them all. That being said, we just issued a notice to proceed with construction for the Belleville station up near the Nebraska line. So that one will be open probably mid-May, maybe sooner, kind of depends on the weather this time of year. They're hoping to start construction before the end of the month. And then we have another one in Garden City. It's going to be same thing, moving to construction soon. They're going through their final permitting, so that's wonderful. Others are in various points of design, obligation. It's like this whole, like Brian mentioned, this is brand new to KDOT. We had never done this before. We had to build the whole program from the beginning. We did a small first round because we knew we were going to make mistakes. And we did. We made a few, but we fixed them in the second round, doing better. We're getting ready to roll out our third round. The RFP tentatively will be out by the end of March. We're looking to target, I think it's 10 locations, mostly rural areas, and then doing some expansion of charging at some of the turnpike service areas, where, you know, you've got like 2 chargers and some level 2 charging. So looking to expand those. That'll be the goal of that. Once we have our third round out and have proposals, they're under contract, we are going to request that we are certified as fully built out. Part of the NEVI program, you had to build out your federally designated EV charging corridors first before you could build charging anywhere else in the state. During the time that the pause happened, the rules on the NEVI program were changed. That has allowed us that we believe we're going to reach build out more quickly. We previously had to have a station every 50 miles. They had to be within 1 mile of the corridor. In some parts of rural Kansas, that is a challenge. I mean, we don't, you know, there's one location actually that we're targeting in the next round between Salina and Hayes. There's not even 3-phase power at any of the I-70 exits. So obviously you can't put a DC fast charging station there. So that's going to be a challenge. But because that 50-mile gap has been removed from the requirements, and because the 1 mile from the corridor, because that limitation has been removed, that's going to give us a lot more flexibility in where we locate these stations. Now, that being said, I am an EV driver myself, and I do not want to have huge gaps in the network because, like, you know, a couple weeks ago when it was like 10 degrees and I was running the heat and the seat heaters and, you know, my rate plummeted. And so I want to be sure that I still have charging and I can make it to the next town. So we are not planning to go over about 70, 75 miles in a gap. So you should be able to, if you're on those interstates, if you're on those major highways, which I guess I should say in Kansas, the designated EV charging corridors are the interstates, US 400, which is mostly 4-lane across the southern part of the state from Colorado to Missouri. And then that section, everybody still thinks it's 135 that goes from Salina to the Nebraska border, but it's actually a US Highway 81. So that section, that's our corridors. And so we want to make sure that we have charging, as I said, at least every 75 miles if we can't get to the 50. As I said, our next round will be, we'll start the RFI process by the end of March. That's our goal. And then hopefully those will be announced. The final awards, we'll do an RFI process, RFP, et cetera. Those will hopefully be announced in September, and then be able to, they'll probably start construction, I would guess, maybe next spring. So about this time next year, we'll have some of those moving to construction. While we're doing that, we're planning, as I said, to request fully built out certification. That allows us to, number one, put stations anywhere in the state where we want them. And number two, we can right size those stations. So not every community needs a 600 kilowatt bank of chargers like that. That's not a necessity in every community. But probably every community should have some level 2 charging in their downtown, or maybe, a couple fast chargers, a couple of level 2. And so that's what we'll be looking at. We have a few cities that we call them like a regional hub. They act as a regional hub. I'll use Liberal, Kansas as an example. It's in the southwest corner of the state. It's the area where all the surrounding counties come for shopping, business, education, medical treatment, etc. So that's like a regional hub. It's not on one of those EV charging corridors, but we absolutely know people are coming in, they're doing their business, whatever they need to get done, and heading back to their rural community. Those types of areas we're going to target for DC fast charging stations. And once we get to build out some communities like that, Great Bend, Fort Scott, those types of areas. After that, we're looking to more broadly put level 2 charging stations in many areas around the state. State parks, there's been an interest there in having them at state parks. I don't know about you, but I never go to a state park for less than a couple of hours, so good place for level 2 charging. Then we've also had some interest from different highways, 36, 39, I think it's 36 across the northern part of the state. They're interested. We'll be looking at charging up there. And then multiple communities have reached out to us just wanting to have level 2 charging in their community, in their downtown, to bring commerce into their downtown. They recognize the EV drivers, and if you see the data, when you stop to charge, you're buying something else usually. So they've recognized that adds commerce to their communities, and they're wanting to have us in there. So we have more details in our full NEVI plan that we submitted last September. Caveat being that was September. A few things have changed since then, but that's the general idea of how we plan to move forward. And you can find that on our website, ksdot.gov. And then if you just look under programs, multimodal programs, NEVI, because the URL is like really long. But that's how you could find it. The other thing we have going for EV charging, the state of Kansas actually had some carbon reduction funding. We also did a pilot program for EV charging in communities. We had about a dozen communities that were interested. Ended up only about a half dozen or so submitted applications. I think we ended up awarding 4. But through the long process of this, the federal pause, we've had different ones drop out. So we have one that we're building. But it's going to go to construction at the beginning of April and should be done by the end of April at the Rolling Hills Zoo, just west of Salina, which is a really great zoo. If you've never taken your kids there, you should absolutely go. Super great place to visit. But excited about that, and we're learning a lot through that, so that hopefully when we get to that community charging phase of the NEVI program, we'll be able to move a little more quickly. And, like Brand said, we're learning as we go. This is completely new to KDOT. Every round, we've made improvements, trying to make it better, how we can streamline it, how we can cut down this time that it takes to get this done. But hoping to move forward and get a bunch more charging stations out there so that we can go wherever we want in the state as EV drivers and not have to worry about that range anxiety.
Thank you, Tami. How about a round of applause for our panel? Very good. Jamie, what time do we wrap today? How long do we have? How much runway do I have? 12:30? Yep. So we got a half an hour. Okay. All right. So here's the deal, folks. I've got questions. My questions are at best my imagination of your interests. At worst, my questions are entirely tied to my interests. So, to the extent you want to ensure your interests are, discussed today, please. I believe we have cards on the table. Is that true? And if you put a button on a card, and I don't know, hold your hand up, whatever, and Eli Jamie is going to see you in a flash, and he'll be over even quicker, and we will, have crowd questions in that manner. While we are kind of getting that wheel turning, I am going to begin by asking, is there anybody from the city of Kansas City in the audience? That just seeing if there's any fact checkers for app. Okay, all right, that's just curious. Anne-Marie, are you aware, is Kansas City pursuing kind of a longer-term fleet goal? You mentioned they're flirting with 10% fleet at the moment. Are they on a trajectory to a stated goal, or are they kind of proceeding at whatever pace makes sense by whatever metrics they're using?
Yeah, nothing that's like we need to have X% by X year, which were pretty popular in the last 5 years, but we've seen not as popular anymore to have such a aggressive stated goal. But the thing that I've found interesting at the city is just the way it's set up. So there's the central fleet department, but really their goal is to maintain the vehicles and fulfill requests from the departments. So the interest really varies department to department based on the kind of department they are. For example, the health department has been very interested. One, I think, just with their mission of public health, and then two, their type of vehicles they're using are very set up to electrify. So I'd say the goals really depend on the department you're working with, and that's why we try to, in our project, identify what departments those would be that would be interested to keep going with this light-duty fleet transition, and then do our part from the central fleet division to say, if you do want to keep requesting EVs, here's some electrification plans. Sure. As you could get charging to support those.
Just a quick follow-up on that. I guess I'm pit-pick, so I'm not following it. Sorry. You mentioned a little bit about kind of moving charging around and managing the charging process and TOE rates and things like that. Can you just share a little bit about the thinking, the conversations that are happening within the city? How are they thinking about moving to time of use rates and being able to leverage those to lower their fuel costs?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's an interesting balance, right? Of each facility we went to, it's we don't want to change our operations at all, but also on the other side of things is to get the most impacts of electrification, you probably are going to have to. So we tried to find that middle ground of, how many chargers make sense so people aren't playing a crazy game of, having to rotate like crazy, but there's not a bunch of chargers just sitting empty every day too. So try to find that balance of where could we put a charging that, matches where people are parking right now, but also kind of finds that balance of being able to get those time of use rate benefits.
Thank you. Now, I would offer, with respect to time of use rates, depending on your organization, your organization's priorities, not only is there a price of energy benefit to charging off-peakly or on a rate, but in our area, the energy overnight is primarily supplied by wind. So the carbon intensity of your vehicle's fuel is much, much lower when you are charging overnight. And, to the extent you have sustainability goals that you're trying to further, you can also highlight from that in your various stakeholder communications. Dave, you're on the hot seat. Okay, so how are you using the RFI process? And the question is specifically about those rural areas, and does the RFI process allow for creativity, like folks co-locating batteries to decrease the amount of electric infrastructure they need to supply those? You are on Lotus.
Yeah, absolutely. So the RFI process, it's going to be a little, there's going to be more questions than we've previously asked. So we're going to want to know what types of amenities are available at the locations that you're looking at proposing. Because we've also heard from EV drivers, there's things they want to have when they stop to charge. They want to have access to a restroom. They want to have, be able to get a bite to eat, something to drink. Lighting. Lighting's not actually in the federal requirements, but they want to have that lighting. Can't believe it's not in the federal requirements, but it is in KDOT's requirements. Like, those are things that we have added on to that. So the RFI process is going to see, what can you provide in these rural communities? Because some of the ones that we've gotten already have been, large travel centers and truck stops, convenience stores, et cetera, that have all of that. They're used to providing that to the traveling public. But when we get to these rural areas, there's no Casey's, there's no Love's, no McDonald's. They don't have those types of entities to be able to provide that. So that's more of a challenge, what type of are you looking at? And then also, yes, we want to know, we've met with a lot of the utilities in these communities. That's how we found out that there's no three-phase charging along I-70 there west of Salina. So that we've met with them to find out, okay, where is this even feasible? So we've done that part. But the RFI process will also give us information and allow us to share information to say, hey, in this area, you're probably going to want to put batteries in. The demand charge is really high, so you're going to want to tamp down your demand charge. You're going to need to supplement power, et cetera. The NEVI funding will cover that. That is allowable under the NEVI funding as an expense. So it can be reimbursed at that 80% for other types of charging stations. So those things are absolutely eligible, but that's what we're looking at, is to get feedback on that. And when we get that feedback, be able to adjust the requirements or maybe the distance. We're shooting for stuff within 2 miles of the highway, but do we need to go further? Is there nothing there? What's the option? And trying to weigh driver convenience with addressing range anxiety. What's our options here? And that'll ultimately guide how we go out with our RFP later in this late spring.
Thank you. The next question really highlights kind of an area of lower coverage within the metro. So this is a very metro-centric question, and specifically it's talking about the northwest corner of the KC Metro. And if you look at it on a plug share map, it's pretty sparse from a charging perspective. And wanting to know if anybody has any insight on why that is. I have some thoughts if nobody else wants to tackle this one, but Tami.
I actually have a little bit of information on that, because we noticed the same thing too. We're like, what is this big hole in the middle of the KC Metro where there's no charging? I will say we are planning to put, we're not it's not on the Missouri side, so it's not that far west or not that far east. But we're planning to put, or at least try to put a NEVI station in that area. So there'll at least be a high-powered DC fast charging station in that area. We're looking at that. We met with Board of Public Utilities last week, the week before. They have a clause in their rate structure or something like that about reselling power by the kilowatt, which actually was a law that Kansas had on the books a while back that we had to get changed. They changed it and exempted it for EV charging, that it was acceptable. But that's something, a policy issue that they're going to have to work out in order to make this happen. So I think that may be one of the issues there. And, before you're all like, what? Are you kidding me? Like these rules were put in place for a good reason. They didn't want landlords to be overcharging people for electricity. So when these rules were put in place, there was a reason for it. It's just that now the technology has outgrown that. So they're going to have to adjust that. And I think that will probably significantly help that issue.
Tami, is that law modifications that could be sponsored by KDOT or Buc-ee's?
I'm guessing Buc-ee's, because KDOT, we cannot lobby, but we did talk to them about it and say, because the NEVI funding, we did have an allowance at the beginning of the funding to be able to charge by time. So it's like, okay, it's basically a parking fee. You're going to pay so much a minute to park here. And, oh, yeah, you can also plug in. But it was limited for a year that you were allowed to do that. And then you had to get your state legislation changed so that you could charge for the energy that was actually dispensed. So we can't do that with NEVI funding anymore. And we told them that and said, he's like, okay, we're going to have to work on that. So, and I think that that's actually going to happen. That hopefully we'll see. But I know sometimes this process can be long. It can take a while. So it's probably not going to happen next month, but maybe next year. So.
Very good. This next question is a interesting one. I'm just going to throw it out here and see if anybody has heard any chatter in this area. The idea of using basically non-traditional level 2 sources of charging in like rural areas. And they think autonomous vehicles, think robots, think out of the box.
So this is, I got to turn this thing off. This is actually a problem that the state parks had. There's the kind of adapter that you need to plug your camper in. You can get that to plug your EV in and charge it, and it's faster than 120. But I don't think it's not like level 2 charging. But they had people that had this adapter and they were plugging in, but it was overloading circuits at the state parks. Because if you think about it, your camper, if you get your lights on for a little bit, your fridge kicks on for a little bit, you might run the air conditioner for a little bit or not, but it's not like an extended period of time, high amperage, like a car charging is. And so it was overloading circuits at the state park, which is one of the reasons they want to put in that level 2 charging. So that is something that people have been doing, but we're trying to solve that for the state parks because it's been an issue. I will say, people are concerned about the range anxiety, the issues with charging. And I have to tell people this frequently. You guys are all EV drivers, so you probably know this. But I frequently tell people, you can literally charge a car anywhere there's electricity. You know that. It just takes longer. And they're like, oh, really? Like that? That's a revelation to a lot of them. So there is that. I always have my convenience charger in the back of the car, just in case. Just in case, if I just need a few miles to get to the next charging station, it's always there. So there's that.
Thank you. Okay, Brian, you've avoided. Not avoided. You've avoid. Are you ready? Okay. Can you talk a little bit about coding, building codes, or Johnson County perspective? Do we have codes in place that are kind of nudging people towards more EV-friendly developments? Is that contemplated? If not, can you just speak to codes?
I can try. Not really yet. But we do know that it is being contemplated. For example, we see a lot of multifamily construction happening in Johnson County. Most of that happens without charging infrastructure, because it's not required, and it's expensive. And so part of that is creating the demand from the populations that will inhabit those multifamily facilities, that's an amenity that they expect. Codes has not caught up with that. So part of it is the public demand for that amenity and the response to that demand, and then part of it will be regulatory, which has not caught up yet. There's also some code requirements for residential that need to catch up as well, as far as making residences EV ready, EV charging ready. Again, not mandatory yet, but is definitely on the horizon. I will also mention that one of the things that we've confronted with this project in particular is with the variety of partners that we have and the differences in city codes, and trying to design a bid package that will be all things to all partners, that we've struggled a little bit because some of those are in conflict with each other. And we've been able to overcome that. But there is that issue of inconsistency and inconsistent expectation that, this is just all catching up with. So it is definitely a struggle, but we're not there yet.
Okay, thank you. Next question. You all three might have a perspective of this. Is okay. We install chargers, and that's great, but we have to take care of them. And Tami, kick us off. Just if you could talk a little bit about the characteristics of NEVI that maybe encourage upkeep, I would say.
So when you receive the NEVI funding, you're required to operate the station for a minimum of 5 years. So there's that. It has to be up and running for 5 years. There's also a requirement that they meet 97% uptime. And they have to report that quarterly. They have to report their uptime. There is not, however, in the federal regulations what happens if they don't. So we're not exactly sure what happens there if they don't need it. But I will say I know there was a problem with uptime with some of the early stations, but it is getting better. Matter of fact, the Emporia station, they reported no downtime. Like it's been up since they opened it March 31st of last year. So there's that. It's getting better. They have to meet it. But again, like I said, there's nothing in there that says what happens if they don't. So we'll see what happens if we have some charging network providers that aren't meeting it.
Yeah. Anyone else with thoughts about just O&M associated with charging stations?
Yeah, I can add a little bit from the fleet perspective. It's interesting. We work with a lot of charging providers, and you'll get a quote from them, and the hardware itself will be one line, and then they'll have about 15 lines underneath about additional services they want to provide. So we found that, the providers want to make their money after they sell you the physical hardware. The charger itself isn't that expensive, but there can be a lot of, software packages. But included in that, related to maintenance, is you can get, maintenance included so that you don't have to deal with it. So it kind of depends, how much you want to pay for, right? Do you want to have your staff being able to maintain it, which then becomes some training situations there too? Or do you just want to make sure that you budget for that so that you're when you get that charger from the charger manufacturer, you're saying, hey, I'm going to buy this from you, but I also want to buy your maintenance package, and that that the charger is maintained over X amount of time.
I'll add one more quick point about that. About one, we're required to uphold the standards that KDOT has specified for our chargers, it being a federally funded project. So everything Tami says goes for our project as well. But I'll also add that for our particular project, each partner is going to own and operate their chargers in their location. And so there is that requirement. There's that expectation. There's the 5-year requirement. There's also, and we met about this with not just the partners on this project, but all of the public entities in Johnson County who own and operate public-facing chargers, how we address charging for charging, how we address charging a fee for charging, and that's kind of all over the board, which is expected in some way, but also a detriment in others in that there's really no consistency in the expectation of what the public experiences when they go to visit a public-facing charger. And I think that's an issue. So we met to talk about what policies are out there, what policies are jurisdictions considering. And part of the reasoning for that is, how do you recover some of the costs of owning and maintaining those chargers? And some of them are put in very inexpensively. Some of them have maintenance agreements that make them more expensive. So how do you recover some of those costs from the users of those charging stations to the extent that, or to the point that it's not a burden on the owner and the operator. Because that's what we don't want to have happen is we put these in and they're owned and operated by the cities or the parks or whoever, and it's just a terrible experience. They don't like having them. They're constantly breaking. People are plugging them in and driving off with them still plugged in, and you got to replace the heads. We don't want this to be a hassle. We want it to be a public amenity, a public service that works for everybody, the host included.
Have you all settled on is it going to be a common cost policy across all of those?
No, but we want to get close.
Specific?
Yeah.
Business is going to have their own kind of, okay, got it.
I will add, too, that under the NEVI program, those costs for the 5 years are allowable. They'll pay your networking costs, maintenance plan, all of that is included in the funding. So that helps with that.
Couple of quick hitters, kind of granular, related to the availability of charging. First is, Tami, when you see people who are responding to your RFPs, is it pretty common to have suggested sites that are like, Shells, Flying J's, the traditional obvious fits versus like standalone, this is all this is ever going to be is charging?
So far, yes. All that we received, surprisingly, we didn't receive any fast food restaurants, and they meet all the requirements. So that was a surprise to us that we didn't receive any of those. A lot of travel centers, convenience stores, truck stops, those types of locations. We did receive one. It was called a grocery store, but I think it was more like a convenience store. And then hotels, which we thought was odd because DC fast charging at a hotel, it's just a bad fit for whether you're the traveler using the station or you're someone staying at the hotel. Because I don't want to get up at 1 a.m. and move my car. I want to plug it in and then go get it in the morning when I have my coffee. So that's really what we've received. Well, charging network operators, but they're citing them at those types of locations. That's really all that we've seen.
Next question is 69 Highway down to the state line? Is that a corridor fee?
It is not a corridor, but we do recognize that it has high traffic, and we do plan to target some locations along there once we get to that build out, which we hope will happen later this year. That's our plan.
Well, there's at least one person in the audience that recognizes that too, Jay. Oh. Okay. Tami, you're still on the hot seat. How are you navigating acronym I don't know? BABA? America.
Buy America, Build America.
Yeah, okay. How are you navigating that?
So right now there is a waiver for the electric vehicle charging equipment, just for the charger, that it has to be assembled in the U.S. and 55% content, U.S. content, by value. Just yesterday, I got notice that they are looking to change that to maybe 100% U.S. and U.S. content. I haven't dug into it, got feedback to know if that's doable even right now. It seems like a lot because there's so many things that you have to trace. I feel like 100% would be a challenge, but we might be able to up it from 55. I don't know. I'll have to learn more about it, but that's happening now. We are still required on like the other parts of a project, the wiring that has to be compliant, but we don't have an issue with that. Switchgear and transformers, those are under manufactured products, which is at 55%. Transformers has not been an issue, but switchgear has, but I think it's more just availability of them at all than really the requirements, that there's just not enough available because too many projects, electrical projects, data centers, AI, et cetera, are using it. But that's really where we're at.
Okay. We are down to just a few minutes. I want to talk a little bit about the scenario you painted for us where you have the third round of NEVI awards, and then you request that the federal government, whoever that is,
Federal Highway Administration.
Okay, Federal Highway Administration. Agree with you that you are built out. How much money do you think you're going to have left over for kind of community disbursement?
We're estimating 17 to 20 million. That's going to depend on what prices have done since, because it's been over a year since we've gotten proposals. So during the federal pause last year, but I don't know what prices have done. Previously, we were averaging a federal award on the NEVI projects of about, I think it was about 769,000 per station. If that continues, we'll probably have closer to 20 million. If the cost of those have really gone up, it's going to be less than that, but a significant amount because, I mean, for instance, the level 2 charging station that we're putting in at Rolling Hills is around 100,000 versus 800,000-900,000 for a DC fast charge station. So it'll be enough money to go around. We think we'll get good coverage around the state, but we'll see when we get this next round of RFP what prices have done.
You spoke about kind of how you might use that money to add charging to places, and I think you rattled off state locations, municipality, things of that nature. Do you also contemplate a competitive process for awards? And the question behind the question is, should Johnson County, should MARC, should Climate Action KC be thinking about coming together with a consortium and an ask for you for part of this money?
Maybe. We'll have to go back to the drawing board. I mean, we know what we're going to do for some of those early rounds of that. Like I said, we have those regional hooks that we want to target, and we'll probably do that just like we've done the other rounds of NEVI. Once we get to that community, we don't know. Does the community themselves, do they want to fund the local portion, the local match for the federal funding? Is there interest in maybe a charging network provider that wants to come in and build their network and put in a bunch of level 2 chargers across the state? We really don't know how that will work. But yeah, if you're interested, you've got an idea, I'd love to hear from you and meet with you. And, while we're trying to work that out, that'd be great. Come get a card from me or get my email or something. I'd love to hear from you.
Brian, does the county have a roadmap? Is what you're doing? You're a pilot that I'm sure somebody, maybe you, has an eye on what might come after.
Really, we rely on the EV readiness plan that Mid-America National Council put together, which is really an excellent plan, and involves way more than just Johnson County, but we consider ourselves just part of that approach.
Very good. Okay, we're at 5 minutes. If you'll suffer me, I've got an Evergy question that may have some interest more broadly in the room. And the question is, what is Evergy doing to encourage EVs as distributed storage? And in this area, I would point to at least 2 things, maybe 3. Firstly is we are working on a vehicle-to-grid pilot with some school buses in the city of Topeka. It's not the scope. We're kind of down to the nits and gnats as far as nailing down that scope. But this will be our first kind of real foray into exporting energy from a battery on wheels to the grid. So that's one thing we're doing. Secondly, we have executed a residential battery pilot in Missouri. It's finished, and we are in progress with a pilot in Kansas. And what is a residential battery but an EV without the wheels? So there are those 2 things rhyme a lot. A lot of the learnings, a lot of the challenges that you encounter in a residential battery project apply to the scenario of exporting energy from a car that's parked in a garage, either to the house to kind of island off the house from the grid, or ultimately, sending that energy to the grid. So those are a couple of areas that we are active in that ultimately recognize the long-term future of our grid involves bidirectional flow. I mean, I think that any doubt of that is probably behind us at this point. The technology is there. It's just going to be a matter of scaling it and proving it out at the appropriate pace so as to not have a deleterious impact on affordability and reliability, right? 3 minutes.
I'm looking.
Federal funds. A lot of federal funding. Is Casey moving some federal funding?
Yeah, our planning study was third grade.
Yeah, so there was a freeze and there was a thaw, and I'm interested in whether you have observed kind of lingering impacts of that, and then just kind of the overall policy environment. Is there a chill in the air?
Yeah, it's definitely cooled. We did have, as I mentioned earlier, there were a few that they had to drop out. Just, equipment prices changed during the pause. So we've told them they can reapply with the new budget. That's fine. So we'll see what happens there. Brian mentioned the issues with the carbon reduction funding. That was paused for a bit. That's what's made this project that from 23, we're just now getting to building. So there's that. There are also the recent reappropriations for the funding. It's reappropriating somewhere, I don't know where they finally ended up with the final bill, but somewhere between 500 and 800 and some million out of the NEVI program to, I don't know, something else. I think it was going to FAA. I'm not sure. However, it was based on the amount of your 2022 funding that was obligated. Kansas has obligated all of our 2022 funding, so we don't think we're going to lose anything yet. But this was the reappropriation that should have happened by last October 1st. They're starting again on reappropriation for this coming October 1st, which is when the DOT funding will run out. So we don't know. We'll see what happens. I mean, like, they may do something where if you don't have obligated funding, there's like all these steps. The funding's allocated to Kansas, but we have to go through the RFI process and get a project under contract before we can obligate it. So then that funding is obligated to that specific project. And without that obligation, technically they can pull it back. I don't know. It's a challenge because the NEVI funding was supposed to be not sunset. Like we had it until it was exhausted, but now they're putting these rules on it. You have to spend it in a certain amount of time, which is not uncommon for federal projects. That does happen with a lot of other federal projects. You have 5 years to spend it. If you don't spend it, it goes back into the pool. But it wasn't supposed to be that way with NEVI, and so that may be a challenge, us getting the money to the point where we can obligate it quickly enough that we don't lose anything. So
I appreciate that.
Well, I'll say our project is roughly in the same boat.
Yeah.
We had our project is broken up in design phase and construction phase. Our design funds were released to us about this time last year when the freeze was pretty frozen, and specific language about EVs and EV charging infrastructure, federal funds being absolutely frozen. Frankly, I'm a little surprised our funds got released and we were able to continue with this project. There's still no guarantee that the construction funds for that will get released to us, so all the partners understand that there's some risk involved in going through this design process with no guarantee that we'll actually be able to put them in the ground. So we're in foggy territory, but we just keep doing the best we can with what we've got.
Very good. And then let me just say before we close here, this has been a very Kansas-centric conversation, has it not? And we originally tried to get somebody from MoDOT in the room to be assist. Maybe they were taking my chair, I don't know. I think we can read between the lines on kind of what that means insofar as Missouri's push to utilize NEVI funds. I'll make any y'all say it. I'll say it. You know, I've been in meetings where they're talking about the potential for Missouri to lose a substantial fraction of their NEVI funds due to to lack of use. So it's a concern. If you live on the Missouri side and you care about charging, maybe hit up your representative, because it's not a priority in Missouri right now. They have their own priorities, choices with make. With that, please round of applause for the panel.